mentees, take out your notebooks and your pens, because we're just about to be taken on a journey. Fasiha is going to introduce, Fasiha Hassan is our speaker of the day. She is a political leader and she is an activist. She is notable for the role that she played in Fees Must Fall. But I think, like you can see, young, we admire her. She embodies a lot of the modules that we have previously done. She's clearly a leader. You're going to hear how clearly she communicates. She's going to talk about running for public office. So for us, Fasiha is a person who actually brings the package of Girls for Girls together. This is who we are hoping you will all be in a few years' time when we call Innocentia or Shireen or Kylie. This is the profile that we will be hearing from you. So Fasiha is going to talk to us about ethics and values. And as we always do, Fasiha is going to share a few stories so that we understand how ethics and values are called upon in those different roles when she was a leader, as she's communicating, as she's negotiating and running for public office. So without much ado, let me invite Fasiha to the stage. Come, guys. This is the way we do accolades, Fasiha.
I like it. I like it. It works for the online system.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. So my name's Fasiha. I'm so sorry I was a little bit late. I was just saying to Rita earlier today, and I said to Val the other day, you know, it's Mandela Day, so there's like all these different things going on, but I'm really glad to be here. And I'm going to share a little bit about my story and try and tie it into the ethics and the values theme for today. But just a quick heads up, I've got kittens and they're in my room, so I suspect throughout the talk they may find themselves here because they also, you know, they sit by themselves and they're happy until I have an online video call, in which case they very much want to participate. So just a heads up in case that happens. Right, so I actually am currently the youngest member of the Gauteng Provincial Legislature, so basically the Parliament for Gauteng. And I'm very, very lucky not just to be there, but also to be sort of representing young people. And I'll talk a little bit about that, but I want to start this space because when I was contacted by Violet to talk about ethics and values, I thought this is a fundamentally important thing. And it's very important also because a lot of people tend to think it's just leaders or politicians or like sort of high up members of society that this applies to, right? We think, okay, only politicians need to have this certain backbone of ethics and morality, but really it's something that I think all of us need to talk about and all of us need to really sort of focus on. So the first thing very quickly that I want to talk about is really the difference between ethics and values. Because often people talk about it interchangeably and they are definitely related, but they're not exactly the same thing. Also, if you lose my audio or something goes wrong, feel free to interrupt me, don't worry. I want to make sure everything gets across. So, you know, when I did a little bit of research, ethics basically are the set of rules that govern our behavior as a person, you know, so it's more broad. It's more broad-based about how you would act, whereas values refer to our beliefs. So if you believe in honesty as an important thing, if you believe people need to be open with their communication, for example, those are values. And ethics pull together those different values into a much broader framework. And I'll talk about that, right? But I'll relate it to real life examples. So yes, I started out in university. I went to Wits University. And one of the things that, well, now people know about that we experienced was really around students who came from poorer backgrounds, disadvantaged backgrounds, and didn't have access to the university space. Now, if you don't know, university, even now, is still very expensive. And if you don't have funding and you don't have a bursary or scholarship, it becomes virtually impossible to enter. And a lot of people, even if you do get a scholarship, often doesn't cover the full cost of your university education, especially if you're coming in from a different province where you have to stay in university res, or, you know, you sort of need even more support than normal. And we were in the SRC in 2015, that's basically the Student Representative Council. And we came across lots and lots of people who, even at the beginning of the year, there was some confusion between NSFAS, which is the funding scheme of government, and the university, where there was some over allocation. So more students were told that they had funding than there was actual money for. And then what happened at the end of that year, or January rather, because people were trying to register again for the following year, Wits and others were like, oh no, no one paid your fees, you can't come back. So that's called financial exclusion. When you have outstanding fees and the university basically says, until you pay your fees, you can't come back. And that's something we were really against, and we've been fighting for a long time. Anyway, through that process, we really figured out that the funding schemes are not enough. University is highly inaccessible, and really it doesn't matter. And this is what we saw, and I think this is the thing that killed all of us. It didn't matter how hard a person worked. Even if you got straight A's, you'd never know it because they never released your results if you had outstanding fees. So we had tons of young people who were really hardworking, even if you were not necessarily academic. I mean, they were doing well enough, who were just having the doors shut in their face. And that wasn't something that was okay with us. And so we started Fees Must Fall, what we now know as Fees Must Fall, which was essentially sort of this largest the largest sort of mobilization of young people in a protest form, sure, but the largest mobilization of young people post-democracy. And it was led by young people like yourself, like myself, I think we were 21 at the time. And we were really able to show the entire country. We started off as 20 people. Within a few hours, we were a few hundred. Within a few days, we were thousands. And we showed the entire country what can happen when young people speak together in one voice, and when young people say, this is the issue that we want to fight. Now, I won't go into too much detail about that. If there's time or questions, I will, but I want to tie it into some sort of difficult dilemmas, ethical dilemmas, and sort of values that were questioned, or I found myself questioning. And I'll bring in a few stories and really what I think. One of the things that we chose to protest or utilize to protest was the only thing that we had power over, all right? As students, you don't have money, you don't really have a position in society. The only thing you have is your potential to graduate, the academic year, right? That's what you have as your bargaining power. Because we know that they needed graduates. We knew that that was it. No one else had anything else. And also for us, it was really important because we actually took a very literal idea of closing the doors of higher learning. So we knew that if these fee increments came through, thousands of students would just have the doors of learning shut against them. And so we took that very literally and said, well, why don't we just block the gates of the university with our bodies? So it's a non-violent action, but a very militant one in which we said we're not going to move. So we sat down like on the tar as a row of people, and we just refused to move, whether there were cars, whether there were people. Yes, we did almost get run down. Some people did. But it was really around showing the country that this is an issue that nobody can ignore. Now, there were obviously successes to Fees Must Fall, which came later. But in 2015, we had been protesting for many weeks. There was a lot of support. But in any sort of situation, it had become a very people were either for us or against us, right? And those were the kind of two very extreme views that we were having. And we were faced with a dilemma at the time as the SRC, because I did 2 terms. So I was still in the SRC at the time. Do we continue this protest and potentially look at the loss of the academic year, okay? Or do we go back but acknowledge that there are students who will get left behind? So how did you balance the idea of what you were fighting for? And I mean, we fought so hard around this idea of getting free education. It wasn't there. The president had just announced this commission on free education. So we were faced with that. This is this idea of, if we don't go back to class soon, it means there's not going to be doctors, they're not going to be pharmacists, they're not going to be engineers, they're not going to be accountants, they're not going to be lawyers, because we won't graduate on time. And it was very, very difficult because there were many students who had said to us, I'm from a poor background, I really need to finish this degree. At the same time, there was another poor student saying to us, I don't have fees or funding. If we stop now, I won't be able to come back to university. And this was, I think, as a young person, one of the most difficult decisions we ever had to face, because it was not just right or wrong, it was not black or white, the entire thing was gray. And there was no real right answer. in the end, we made a very difficult decision, and there are days where I stay up at night still thinking whether it was the right one. But we decided to call off the protest and to go back to class with the idea that we would continue fighting. And also, and this is also important, and I want to stress this, when making a decision, you're not the only person who has ideas or expertise on it. So what happened is we actually went to Amit Kathrada and Uncle Lalu Chiba, who were, ANC, but more struggle stalwarts, who had done mass organizing during the apartheid eras. They did what you call, or what we now know as the bus boycott and the potato boycott, but were very interesting because they convinced people to forego things that would benefit them in favor of a long-term political goal. So when we spoke to them, they said to us, or one of the big advices they gave us was, you can or you should call off a protest or mass mobilizing effort at a peak, at a height, because it means that you can then remobilize when the time is right again, because people will trust you. You were not forced to go back. It was on your own terms. But of course, we came under severe criticism, particularly from more radical leftist groups. We were also leftist. I won't get into that, but we were also quite radical in that sense. But even more fringe groups for saying, oh, you guys sold out. And that was very, very difficult because we had sacrificed a lot. We were not done. We continued to fight the next year like we said we would. But we came under severe, severe criticism. And I think that was one example in which I had to also look at my principles and my ethics to say, well, what do I believe in here? I believe fundamentally and strongly that we must get access to free education. But is that education going to come in the next 2 months? Most likely not, because we had to find the funding, etc., etc. So that's one example. But I want to share a more personal example as well, because I wanted to give you a little bit of a background. And I think this is also where you need to figure out, whenever you're faced with a difficult sort of situation, who you are and what you stand for. Because when you start to think about it, and you don't have to have the perfect answer, you don't have to have a paragraph of an answer, you just kind of need to have an idea of that, because then you ask yourself, what's important to me? What are my principles? Is my family very important to me? Is my career very important to me? Where am I willing to compromise? And that sort of gives you that moral compass to guide you, or even that compass to guide you. And one of the things I've personally used, and some people will agree, some people may disagree, but I'm a practicing Muslim, and I've sort of found a more progressive Islam. And whenever I'm really faced with a tough situation, especially in political spaces, I kind of refer not just to the Quran, but to sort of practices of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, because he was a very grounded, down-to-earth, but very revolutionary person who was sort of he was anti-racist, he was anti-sexist, he believed in working class struggles, and all these ideas that we hear about now were actually very present then. And that's one of the ways that I sort of do that. But it's not just about having role models. Your role model can be anybody. But you need to understand what you want to take from that role model, right? You need to say, well, what is that idea that I want to emulate? Because you could choose a role model that maybe isn't necessarily the best thing for you, or maybe their ideas don't fit into your life goals. I know I've encountered young people who very often make celebrities or sports people their role models, which I understand. But in a time like this, we need to understand why we find ourselves in the position that we do. Like, it's COVID now, thousands of people, if not millions of people, are going to lose their jobs, okay? We need more and more young people who are going to be involved in society, in building society, to help us overcome these socioeconomic issues. And if your only role model are sports people, or sort of Kim K, I like her, I love her makeup, that's what I choose to emulate from her. But I'm not going to emulate her politics. I'm not going to pretend that they are progressive people who I aspire to be like. But there are some pieces, bits and pieces I take, and that's really also what I want to share. There'll be bits and pieces of things that you want to pull together. But ultimately, remember, you have to look yourself in the mirror every day. You need to make sense of that person that you've become. So that personal experience I wanted to share with you was when I had become the first chairperson of the Muslim Students Association at Wits. And like I said, I was the first woman, and I came under severe attack from like patriarchs, misogynists. They hated the fact that I was a woman, and they hated the fact that I was sort of in a position above them, right? Where where I could, basically look over the committee and do the work. And the interesting thing, just for the information's sake, is I had won the most votes and I had the most merit. But this was not a question about merit. This was not about, it was purely about the fact that I was a woman. And at that time, I faced a different dilemma. And that was, how do I assert myself as a woman, as a feminist, as someone who believes and deserves to be in this position? But how do I do that while at the same time trying to bring people who have a different idea than me to the table? So there was a conservative group, there were groups who were sort of middle ground, but there were also people who were very violently against it. And I had to sit and think for a very long time about whether or how I was going to deal with this. And I share this story because I wanted to give you examples of things that made me who I am or who changed me. And my family will tell you I came home almost every day that year in tears because of how difficult it was and because of how your very existence as a woman in a space is so difficult. Like, you have to fight to be accepted. You have to fight to be taken seriously, and you have to fight for people to believe in not just in you, but in the vision that you have forward. And I share this because it's, like I said, it's not black and white. I felt that at some point, compromising to some of what those very conservative ideas were, I thought I was betraying who I was. At the same time, you're a leader. Your job is not to be liked by everybody. Your job is also to bring in conflicting ideas and try and, find a common ground. In the end, I have to be honest, eventually I stopped doing that. I did it at the beginning because I thought there was value in it. But I later discovered that the people that I was sort of working with or forced to work with didn't have the same intentions. And more importantly, their entire focus was really just on bringing down other women in the space. And so I had to make a very difficult decision to say, well, you know what, I'm going to leave these people behind because their value system doesn't necessarily equal a better society or a better university space or a better organization. And this is where, I had to take a very difficult stance. And before I in preparation, I was chatting to Rita about this. And I'm sure many people on this call and many young women will have experienced this before. The moment you disagree with something or you don't go with sort of what the masses are going with, people start to call you a bitch, they start to call you all sorts of colorful terminologies because they can't justify how you can stand apart and still be okay. How you can say, well, this is not something I agree with, I'm going to do my own thing. And immediately it makes you a target. But I want to say that there are so many women and so many people who have sacrificed and done everything that they can to pave a way for us. I wouldn't be sitting in the legislature at 25, 26 as the youngest person had it not been for other women who came before me, who sort of provided a situation in which I could achieve. And that's another thing that I want to say. The questions and the answers that you need to give yourself is not just about individual interest. You need to think about what this is going to do to affect the collective and how this is going to affect society. Because at the end of the day, we don't live in a society where it's just us. We have family, we have friends. Even the South African idea of Ubuntu means that we need to take into cognizance how everyone else is going to be affected by what's going on. So as long as you know and have an idea of who you are, like I said, it makes it a lot easier to sort of make sense of things. And the last example I'm gonna give you from my life is maybe something that you'll relate to more. And that is actually around when I was in high school. I really struggled with that group of very bitchy girls. I really struggled. I was faced with pretty hectic bullying. I mean, not physical per se, but when girls bully each other, it's very emotional, very mental, name calling. It's really awful. And I was always a kid who didn't always fit in. I never wanted to wear, now I can wear pink, but at the time I was I didn't care about what I wore. I remember as 5, 6-year-old me, all the girls wanted to do ballet and wear these pink dresses. And I remember I begged my mom to go to karate, which never happened, but that was the kind of kid that I was. I really just wanted to live my life and to climb the tree, and I was a bit of a tomboy. And then in high school, when you're starting to change, you're starting to puberty is hitting you, and then at the same time there are these girls who constantly commented, because I was very thin, but weirdly thin. So lots of comments on that about how my body looked. Lots of comments where there was this one guy in particular who liked me, and I didn't like him back. He really freaked me out. And they would consistently try and, like, I don't know, put us in weird situations together, and it wasn't funny. Like, I never found any of those funny. I just found them really horrible and violating. And it got to a point where I actually used to bring a book to school because at break, I just didn't want to hang out, and they didn't want to hang out with me either because I was this like weird kid, where I just used to read at lunch. And I think people don't quite understand when I talk about why books are important to me and reading was important to me. It was really just sort of an escape. And that's not because I didn't want to be cool or didn't want to be popular. I mean, now the tables have really turned. Those same people who were horrific to me then now, like, want to be around me, want to be surrounded by us, you know, because we're successful. They're like, oh yeah, we went to school with her. And I'm shook. I'm so shook. One of the guys that, like, is currently interested in me, his cousin was like head bully chick person. And apparently she talks highly of me. She's like, Fas is such a great person. And I'm just like, what? The same girl who was like horrible, like, go cry in the bathroom. But I was lucky in that I found a group of friends who were also kind of bullied and subjected to this bitchy mean girls crew, who were also victims of that. And we found each other. And when we found each other, I discovered that relationships with young girls and women don't have to be toxic and don't have to be ones where you have to change who you are, or change how you dress or worry. And then, if time will allow, I just wanted to talk about pressures around sending nudes, because I think this is also an important thing. One of the big things, and I'm sure you would have experienced it, especially now we're in a digital age, Instagram, TikTok, etc. Lots of guys put a lot of pressure for us to send like nude pictures or even, you know, sort of sexually provocative pictures. And I think it's just important to talk about because of the pressure that's put on girls in particular, and how often those pictures are later used, you know, to sort of harass and sort of bully and, you know, like blackmail. Oh, if you don't do this, we'll drop pictures on Instagram or we'll send it out on WhatsApp or whatever it is. And there's two things I want to say. I think the first thing is really around being comfortable in who you are, right? If you are comfortable in your body and in yourself, you're allowed to have complete agency to do with what you wish, but just be on a space in which you are able to understand that person. Most people nowadays are unable to really sort of look at the intention as to why we're doing this, and are really unable to, I think, be kind about it. Right? So it's not even about liking a human being. It's also sometimes about power, because guys then tend to share, oh, so many girls send me these nudes, and it becomes part of this objectification. So, you know, I know a lot of girls are experiencing this in school. I experienced it more when I got to university. But yeah, I just want to say, I know what's been going on. I've also been put under pressure. And really, I just, personally, because this is how I've chosen to deal with it, I just sort of say, I'm not comfortable with that. If that's what you want, like, I mean, there are online sites in which people can find things. I'm not comfortable. And I sort of draw the line very strictly because that's how I've chosen to do it. Also because I'm very well aware that this could be used to harm me, harm my reputation, harm my political career. But there are other young women who've chosen to send those things. Just be aware and be sure and trust who you're able to share those things with. And make sure you're in an equal relationship, you know, never one in which you are forced to do things or be uncomfortable in that space together. So yeah, I'm interested to discuss and talk. I know I've spoken a lot, but I'm very keen to hear from everybody and just, yeah, get some thoughts and ideas, even if it's not questions. It can be questions, or it can just be, yeah, anything you want to share with me.
Thank you so much, Fasiha. Thanks. You feel like you've talked a lot. I was wanting you to keep going. Thanks a million. That was very insightful. And it's lovely that I think we got to meet you on Thursday and were able to talk about, you know, different scenarios. We're clearly seeing the benefit of that. So really good discussion that you've had there for us. I've been scribbling notes. First, I thought I was just going to make notes in the chat box, but turns out that I actually wanted to make notes for myself as well. So let's welcome any questions or any comments. And this is particularly from the mentees. This is your last guest. This is the last time that you're going to have someone spending more than an hour with you and giving of her time. How often do you meet a person of her political stature? So please take advantage of it. If you have any questions, raise your hand and then we can, or let me know whoever it is, and then you can direct your question. Anyone?
They said mentees.
I want to ask them a question. Let's give them a little bit of time. Any of the mentees? Or maybe you want to think about it? Should we start with Natasha? Okay. Japulile?
Hi. Okay, hi. I have a question about how other women respond to like the decision you make, the stance you decide to take on. And these are like women outside of your group of friends. Like, are they supportive of you? Do they misunderstand what you're trying to do? Do they think you act better than them? Or like, I'm just wondering how it is other women respond to, you know, like your position and the impact that you've had so far.
Go ahead, Fasiha.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you. Should I just respond one, or do you want to take a few at a time?
We have a bit of a shy group, I must warn you. So
okay, no, that's fine. That's so good. I have one or two things that I didn't say, so I can also put it in here. Jabu, yes. So it's dependent on which spaces I've been in. So how other women respond to me. I've had a mixture, if I'm being honest. There are some women who have been very supportive and some women who have been like, okay, we'll take you under our wing, we'll give you advice. But I've also experienced the opposite. And I'll give you two examples. The one was very recently, I won't mention names, but a senior politician woman who I debated that day in the legislature around climate change and the environment, and it went really well. Like I got good feedback from everybody. Later that night, I got a call from this person and I'm thinking she wants to say, okay, well done. I liked your speech, your debate, whatever. In reality, it was a rap on the knuckles because she said that dress that you wore was inappropriate. You can't wear a sleeveless dress to the house. And I think I was actually wearing this very blazer, but I had taken it off during the debate because, you know, you don't physically fight, of course, but you feel like you're about to go into the ring. And it was a high neck top dress. You couldn't see anything. It like ended here. And I was shocked that I was getting told what I can and can't wear in 2020 by a woman. And it wasn't that I was inappropriately dressed, because I also spoke to other people after. I was like, did you think I was inappropriately dressed? And I really got into, like, I was put in the fire there. And I also had to remind myself that just because somebody is a woman doesn't necessarily mean they're progressive and doesn't necessarily mean they're feminists. And the other experience I had was I did a short stint at a corporate law firm just before I got formally into politics. So I studied law, and then I went to do a part of my articles. And I had a similar, well, not exactly, but a similar sort of experience also with a woman who, I think because she couldn't mold me into who she wanted me to be, reacted very, very badly. She was actually my principal. So when you start your articles at a law firm, what they do is they assign each young candidate attorney to what we call a principal. And she gave me hell. Like, if I can tell you, like, a woman who utilized all of the power dynamics, everything to make my life so difficult. I remember I'd drive home at like 10, 11 o'clock at night, leaving the office and cry in the car because I didn't want my parents to see what was happening. Because, you know, this is another thing maybe we can talk about. So the pressures and the ideas our parents have for us. You know, they want the best life, and they thought, well, this corporate law firm position is at a top law firm. This is what they wanted for me. And I would cry in the car because I just didn't want them to see how difficult it was being. And it wasn't that it was long hours. I work 18-hour days now. It was because I was in a corporate law firm. I wasn't fitting in with their firm culture. I wasn't going to do the things that they were going to do. And also because for me, it's not a life that I would have chosen, you know, making other companies much richer. And I remember very particularly, it was the class action, a big court case around the silicosis thing. So basically, miners in the gold mines, if you work in the mine for very long, you develop a lung issue. Silicosis is horrible, like it's a painful death. It's awful. And I remember that law firm representing the big companies. And when we had asked some of them about the case, they reacted very, very badly, because they were basically saying that the number of people who had silicosis had like doubled, and they didn't think it was honest. And we were like, but aren't there medical records to show this? And when I started to ask those sorts of questions, they were like, this one, we need to isolate and manage this one. And that ultimately led to me resigning, because I couldn't. And also very important, a lot of people were critical of that. A lot of people were like, you're making a mistake. You're going to really F up your career. This is it. This is your law career down the drain. And I had to trust in the fact that I knew I was doing the right thing, because that wasn't who I was. But it takes a lot of courage to do that. And it's definitely not an easy thing. I'm seeing questions in the chat, Rita. Can I?
Go ahead and you can answer them. Innocentia asks, how did you respond to your high school mates when they threw shade at you? Did you isolate yourself? How did you gain the confidence, and what uplifted your self-esteem?
I think initially it was easier to isolate. I think it's also a protective mechanism. You kind of just don't want to be in that environment. But I fast learned that that was also not the best approach, because then you're just kind of alone in your own corner. And I just sort of found things that I really liked doing. And I sort of took up different things. So like I ended up taking up drama, and I found this like really great group of people there. Like I found other things that gave me fulfillment. And the last thing that I think I also stopped doing was I stopped running after them. I was like, I have no reason to be friends with these people. And the moment I also did that, the dynamics changed, because they're like, Sarah really doesn't care anymore, you know. But it was difficult. Like if I can tell you, I almost moved schools. It was really, really tough. And I also learned then, you know, mean girls can be very, very mean, even though they're not physically throwing punches. It can be sometimes worse than that. And then, yeah, like I said, I found things that I liked doing, and that's how I rebuilt my self-esteem. And also just remember, in the bigger picture, in the long run, things are likely to work out for you. More often than not, people who peak in high school, unfortunately, they don't necessarily always do very well after. So it's also to be kind to each other. You don't want to reproduce that same kind of bullying kind of tactic, right? Just because you were in that position. And I'm now cognizant of that, because I'm in a position where I could be like that. And it's taking, let me be honest, it's taking every ounce of my self-discipline to not tell this girl off, because I'm trying to be a bigger person. So 6 months from now, I may have a different view, but right now I'm trying to do the right thing, and I'm trying to be the bigger person. But we'll see how long it lasts.
Okay.
Okay, more questions.
Innocentia, did that answer?
Yeah.
She says, lovely, thanks a lot. So Ntebogang asked, what made you look forward and want to achieve what you wanted to achieve? What
strength?
What gave you strength, or motivated you, I guess?
Okay, so 1 second, sorry. Right, so what gave me sort of strength, what made me look forward? I'll be honest, I didn't actually visualize a career in politics, definitely not. But what I did know is that I wanted to be involved in my community, and I wanted to help people. And that I found, and even today, I find a huge sense of fulfillment in being a part of something bigger than myself, right? And I think this is also where people don't quite understand how valuable it is to be involved in community projects. And, you know, there's a sense of fulfillment in what you do. So I knew I wanted to do that. Obviously, like, you know, I do come from an Indian community. There was some pressures, go be a doctor, go be this. And I did think about it, but I didn't think my personality type was very well suited to it. And so in many ways, I I then decided that I wanted to be a lawyer, but like a human rights lawyer, sort of an NGO lawyer. And I studied actually a BCom, and then I did an LLB. But let me be clear, right? A lot of people, and I don't want to ever be this person who makes it sound like you had the answer from the beginning. I most certainly did not. I was so unsure about what I wanted to study and what I wanted to do. In many ways, I took it as it came. And that's not always necessarily the best approach. Like, I sort of knew where I wanted to go, generally speaking. Like, I knew I wanted to be this lawyer, but I didn't quite know what the pathway would be. And that also, the benefit of that is that it opened me up to all these opportunities I never considered, like SRC, which eventually became Fees Must Fall, which eventually became this. I wouldn't be sitting where I am today if I was very rigidly, oh, I'm going to be a lawyer, because then I would have stayed at that law firm, right? I never would have become who I really am. I would have been a shadow of myself. So it's a bit of a combination of having a plan, but also trusting your gut feeling and trusting in yourself. And don't let anyone persuade you otherwise. It's hard, hard, hard work. Any one of the mentors can tell you, you've got to put in the hours, it's going to require some self-sacrifice. I work sometimes 18-hour days. When my friends are going out, because I'm still young, I'm in my 20s, I'm not usually going out with them. I'm not saying you have to sacrifice all those things, but I'm saying that there will come a time where you will have to sacrifice something in order to reach a much larger goal. And I want to say that openly and honestly, because I don't think people talk about that enough. A lot of people like just go and just sort of become successful without really talking about how much time it takes, how sometimes emotionally draining it can become, and also how difficult it can be. It's most certainly possible. You're going to attain it, but I want everyone to be mentally prepared for what that success comes with. But you grow up as a person, you learn and you adapt to it as well.
So I just want to, it's as if we gave you a cheat sheet, and I want the mentees to reflect back on courageous leadership. If you remember the details underneath to be a courageous leader, the first thing it says, know your mission. Fasiha just talked about it. She was clear that yes, if she was going to be a lawyer, it was going to be to serve people. Fasiha just told us she was interested in community projects. She also told us she didn't know it all from the beginning. You have to find your mission. These are all the things we talked about in session 2. The second thing that Fasiha has talked about that falls under courageous leadership is the one about, who is it? Village. She's talked twice about her village. I don't know whether you've heard it. Her family are her village. When you used to cry, you said at the SRC, you would go home every day in tears, but you felt free, she felt free to cry at home because that was her emotional support. You also talked about finding friends that supported you, I think during the high school times. So again, that is village. You're like the classic courageous leader for us. So I'm hoping that who asked this question? Innocentia asked this question, that you're beginning to see the link between what is in these handbooks, you know, that you guys have, that we gave out at the beginning of the session. It is all in there. And we keep bringing, you know, people to come and talk to you and show you that it's not book ideas. These things are real. So without Fasiha even knowing it, she just gave us a lecture, not only on ethics and values, but she also told us a story about what it takes to be a courageous leader. I was just sitting here and thinking to myself, boom, you're coming back for courageous leadership with another cohort. Okay. Sorry, I just had to chip in with that because I'm hoping that the girls understand that we've not been having theoretical discussions and that it is real. The lessons are real.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If I could just on that, Rita, like we were saying, you know, ethics and values are not in isolation. It's not like, oh, ethics and values, tick, tick. It actually underpins everything in society and everything about also who you are. Even if you take it out of a work perspective, if you have a fight with a partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, how you interact with your friends, how you interact with the person at the shop, at the cashier, all of those things are sort of your ethics and your values playing itself out. So it does underpin everything. And also what I wanted to say, but I'll say it now. There's a huge importance of ethics and values in society, especially in sort of the South African context in which we find rampant corruption. We're finding people who quite blatantly are stealing money from the poor. I can cite a million and one examples, both in government and outside of government. But also just to sort of say that we need to hold all of ourselves to a higher standard. And like I said earlier, it doesn't just go for politicians, CEOs, people we see on the news. We need to hold our friends, we need to hold our families to a higher standards. And you see it also with racism when it plays itself out. How many of us have been in a family situation in which someone has said something really racist or problematic, something really sexist against women, or even just, I recognize we're speaking to girls here, but you may have a guy friend who's been slut-shaming this girl the whole time, or has very problematic ideas when they go out about being entitled to women's attention. And those are things that we also need to call out and we need to push, because we're not going to solve society, both socioeconomic issues and the culture of society, without doing that and without holding ourselves to a higher standard. Like, a lot of people will complain about corruption, right? But when they stop by the cops, they'll bribe the cop. And you're like, that's also corruption. So we all need to sort of understand that we need a change of culture. And we also need to change how we speak to each other and how we interact with each other, because our issues are not just political or economic in nature. It's not just that we have high unemployment rates or people are very poor. It's that there's a problem, I think, in our society where we just keep missing each other. Like, we have the puzzle pieces, okay? I really believe this. We have the right puzzle pieces in South Africa. We just seem unable to match the right pieces together because we just miss each other. We completely miss each other. Like, when men were trying to speak out against gender-based violence, like, let's protect women. And we're like, but you've also missed the point, because we shouldn't need to be protected. You must call yourself out, your friends out, your brothers, your husband, your father, etc. Because who must we be protected from? But the fact that you're saying you need to protect us, it implies that there's someone or something you need to protect us from. And that's the root of the problem. That's where we have to focus it. And then the last one, when someone gets sexually assaulted or harassed or raped, let's not play around. Sometimes it's women who say, oh, were you drunk? What were you wearing? It's not just men who say those things. So we also need to understand that we can perpetuate those problematic ideas, and we need to stop doing that. Sorry, Rita, I just wanted to add that in.
No, you're perfect. It's like you came and attended our session yesterday, because we had the one on GBV.
GBV, yes.
It's the same thing. We what do we contribute towards gender-based violence? Every day we say, no, I'm against it. But the things we say and the way we behave, is perpetuating it. And it is a moral dilemma, because one needs to sit and say, wait a moment, what am I saying and what am I promoting? Am I promoting gender-based violence, or am I actually taking a stand against it? No, that is very well said. Okay.
I got one private question, so I'll just answer it. And the question was whether I spoke to my mom or told my mom what was going on in high school. I didn't initially tell her. In fact, she would just sort of find me crying. I'd make some other excuse. And then eventually I did tell her what was going on. And to my mother's credit, she helped me sort of find a psychologist counselor at the school, and they did try to intervene. But there was like two sort of reactions. There was that reaction, and then there was also another reaction of, and I don't know if anyone else has ever experienced this from parents who kind of like, you kind of just need to pull up your socks and move on. And this was an interesting thing to deal with, because when you're 14 or however old I was, I think I was around that age or a little bit younger, it is the end of the world. It feels like that, because that is your world. Your world is school. Your world are your immediate friends or the immediate people in your school community. And I did find that difficult to sort of comprehend, but I also recognize that it's also part of a generational thing. She comes from this generation where suck it up and move on. Because after a while, when I was at the law firm, they told me the same thing. So I think there is merit for sure in telling parents, but we also mustn't assume that you're going to get a particular reaction, because we are also from very different generations, and how we process things and deal with things is different to other people. So I just wanted to say that.
No, thank you very much. Anyone else? Natasha, you had a question in the beginning?
I forgot it because you took so long.
Why did you not write it down?
I'm very enthralled with what Fasiha is saying. So, I mean, I'm only human. But I have another question, if that helps. Fasiha, your work with Fees Must Fall, etc., and the legislature and the law firm, because I think, yeah, that's when you and I first encountered each other. How do you deal with women with internalized misogyny, women who, for all intents and purposes, because of indoctrination, really uphold patriarchal, well, systemic patriarchy, unintentionally, I think, to a certain degree, because it's just how people have been raised, you know, and it's not even to a certain age. Our moms, our grannies, yes, obviously, but even women, you and I are not the same age, but relatively, you know, our age and younger, stop laughing at me, getting away. Our age and younger still have that, you know, things that, like you're saying, I assume the women in the legislature who told you you were inappropriately dressed, it was older than you, but it happens, you know, women slut shame each other and they can be of the same age, you know. How do you deal with that personally and in your political career?
Thanks, yeah, Natasha, that's quite true. And I also, just for the mentees, so often you come across women who have internalized exactly what Natasha's saying, these ideas that there can only be one woman in the space, or women have a particular place in society. And you see this often, right? You see it with older, like, family members, aunts, grandmothers. You even see it with other people. I mean, not people in my direct school, but in the Muslim community that I came from, because I didn't go to a Muslim school at all. For them, they were like, I'm going to, straight out of school, I'm going to get married. And I was like, but you don't have to anymore. Like, no one's forcing you. Like, you don't have to. You can go study. So many things you can do. And they were like, no, this is what I want to do. And you have to actually unpack that and realize that even though someone seemingly doing it out of choice, it's a product of the society that they were brought up in. So they fundamentally believe that the right thing to do is to just get married and have kids, instead of necessarily explore who they are, study or travel, figure out, you know, what the world is like. Now, I use that example just because I think it's a little bit easier to relate to, but Natasha's quite right. Sometimes it's older women, sometimes it's people around you who constantly uphold these problematic ideas. So one of the things I've had to do, and I'm sure Natasha, Rita, everybody here will have had to unlearn. So you use this term, unlearn things. It means that both directly and indirectly you were taught things growing up, that girls are fragile, that men can't cry, boys can't cry, etc., etc. So this process of unlearning acknowledges that we have to take what we've been told and be critical of it and say, well, hey, does this actually make sense? Is this something I subscribe to? But a lot of people don't do that. And a lot of people unknowingly perpetuate these problematic ideas. So yes, the woman at the legislature was older than me. And a lot of the older women generation, particularly, you know, they like, and it's not a bad thing, they go to church, they wear those particular skirts and, you know, I don't know if you've seen that, you know, with the jacket, and yeah, they have very particular ideas, even about like putting your hair up, wearing this type of earring, that type. And I kind of have to also say that there's lines, right, that I sort of draw. There's some battles that I think are worth fighting and some that are not. So I purposefully don't dress in a particular way, provocatively, to work, because that's just personally something I don't think I should do, right? And also because I work in a very male-dominated space, and I'm already fighting the sexualization of my body in the space. Because I'm young, there's always this idea, like, I'll tell you this, people will always like, so are you single? Oh, you look like, commenting on what I wear, or, oh, so you don't wear dresses, like things like that. I'm sort of every day having to go through those things. So I personally am choosing to dress in a particular way. But it's also around saying, yeah, which battles are worth fighting and which are not. Because for me, it's more about getting meaningful representation of women and ensuring that we get more women at the table. Something that someone recently said, that is that if you are the only woman at the table, then you've done something wrong. because there's also this tokenization. You're only one person. And the idea that only one woman can sit at the table is an idea we need to defeat. So we need to constantly ask ourselves, how do we bring more women into the space so that we can all equally benefit? And this is something that I think we need to learn. The world is big enough for all of us to be successful. It's not just one of us in the friendship group who gets to make it, or one of us in the company, or, you know, one of us. The world, I know it's shocking, but it's truly big enough for all of us to be pretty, all of us to be successful, all of us to be smart, all of us to be, you know, top tier, whatever it is. And just because you're those things doesn't mean you're taking it away from someone else. In fact, that's the problematic idea, that if I'm this, then you can't be. Why can't we do it together? That's also like a patriarchal idea that women are often set up against each other because it benefits them. We're too busy fighting each other while they're the ones who are eating the cake. You know, we never ever see or touch that thing. Meanwhile, we were part of a fundamental part of making it. So yeah, it's about choosing battles, and I think it's also about finding the right allies, finding people who you can rely on, people that, you know, you can find support in. And the last one, just know that you will definitely meet people who don't want you to succeed. And don't let them get in your head, and also know that in the long run it will be okay. Yeah.
I have one final question. Andre, can I ask it? Are you gonna yell at me? Are you gonna yell at me? Okay, great.
Wait, I've not even heard me. I'm not gonna yell at you, but I'm like loving this, because this was,
I know, I can see you are like
breaking down negotiations, breaking down courageous leadership. I'll ask Mabatu to analyze what she has just said and pull out some of them, because we're repeating the session. It is amazing. Fasiha, you have no idea what you're doing. Natasha, go for it. But then I want the other mentors to chip in. And let's relate what Fasiha is saying to the lessons that we have come from. When she talks about allies, I mean, she's just reliving these sessions to us. So, Natasha, go ahead.
Yeah,
but I want
it's a quick thing. It was just I think for a lot of people, they viewed Fees Must Fall as quite a linear movement, right? It was a lot of students fighting against a system that's unequal, obviously. But I know from talking to you, from talking to Shahira, from talking to Nompendula, there was a lot of patriarchy that existed within the Fees Must Fall movement. When you are fighting against a cause, how do you make sure that you still perpetuate your feminist values, even in a system that may be for the greater good, in terms of we must all be better, but it's still inherently patriarchal and misogynist?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people don't necessarily, or were not necessarily privy to that or seeing it. If you were involved, you would have. So one of the things we experienced, as much as it was a very progressive movement, for example, Nombendula would lead a song, like, you know how it is when we protest, people sing, etc.
Yeah.
And there'd be this group who are like, "Who's that woman? We're not gonna follow her when she sings." Or when one of us would speak, getting physically pulled down. That eventually did happen. Or, you know, one of my favorite ones, we'll go up, speak at the maths meeting in front of all these thousands of students. You know, you'll speak about whatever international models of higher education. People will clap, yes, that's great, that's great. And then another male leader will go up and say the same thing you said. Wow, leadership, yes. Like, what? These are students, these are like university students. They're meant to be, and then they're here, right? They're part of the Fees Must Fall movement. Surely, like, they can see what they're doing. Surely they can see that they sort of prioritizing a male voice over a woman voice, and sort of erasing us from the space. And it actually got to a point where we sort of, as women in the space, created what we called Mbogodo Lead. So there's a day we came in, we all wore a particular kind of duk, and then we sang songs around Mam Winnie, not around Mandela, around Adelaide Tambo, not her husband. You know, all of these women figures and icons who have been forgotten and not focused on enough, but who are fundamentally important. So we did experience that. And I think also another thing that people didn't necessarily see or acknowledge, and that is that Fees Must Fall was largely women-led, women organized, women mobilized, etc. Exactly. And that's also why I think we need to tell our narratives and our stories. We're also last thing taught it's framed as being humble, which I think there is space for, but it's also very particular that we mustn't tell our stories, that we must be, and I'm using this word like this, humble, right? Because I think true humility is different, but humble because they don't want us to tell our stories. How many women do we know in our own families and our own groups who've done incredible things and overcome incredible odds, but these stories will never be told? So we also have to tell our stories one way or another. And the nice thing about social media is you don't have to write a novel. You can share posts, you can do a video, you can put up a pic, there's so many different ways we can record our stories. So thanks, Natasha, thanks.
I promise I'm done with my question. Well, I'm not, but I'll be done for now, I promise.
Okay.
Rein yourself in, sister.
I promise. I am. I really
Because that's exactly what I'm doing. There's just so much that Fasiha is sharing, and I'm like, not enough time. But I guess mine is really a comment, Fasiha, and it's something you also said in the beginning around the people that you look up to and the role models that, are in our spaces, and especially young people's spaces. And I just want to, so as part of the work we do with mentors and mentees at G4G is to shine the spotlight. And I want to shine the spotlight on you and say that for me, you epitomize what a celebrity is. In other words, for me, the definition of celebrity is someone whose life we celebrate because of what they do for others. It's not about kind of putting you on a pedestal of any sort. And you are clearly not somebody who is looking to be put on any type of pedestal. So I just want to say to the mentees, especially when you think celebrity, think of every single speaker that has been brought on this platform. Think of this young woman who is before you and start to redefine for yourself what celebrity is. We take nothing away from people who've achieved success through, the arts, actors and sports people, and they've done well for themselves, but look at what it is they do for others beyond just the small confines of their professions. So Fasiha, thank you for you. Thank you for the work that you continue to do. And I think more than that, for me, you are a living demonstration of why in all spheres of society, we need to bring young people along. I am personally, to be quite honest, very tired of seeing only people my age and older making decisions for young people and the rest of us in this country. So please keep pushing the agenda to have young people come along. Mentees, here's Fasiha, look at what she continues to do. I've said to us before, leadership, you never arrive. And I know, Fasiha, you keep growing in your role as a politician, as a lawyer, as a leader in society. So young ladies, young women, mentees, if you ever doubted yourself and thought, I'm too young, if that little voice ever came to you that says, I don't have what it takes, but who am I? Here's a picture right in front of you of a young woman who continues to do amazing things. So Fasiha, we celebrate you, we thank you. As Rita has said, so many of the principles that we talk about, that we teach, your courage, your leadership in, for others, your way of being able to negotiate and kind of, navigate through what I know politics is hard, right? Which is why a lot of people steer clear of it. But you're navigating and finding your own path along that. Your ability to speak with such assertion and clarity and passion. You are it. You are what we keep saying to the girls. Here is something to aspire to. So we celebrate you, we shine the spotlight on you, and we thank you for the work that you do. Please just keep it up. We need more and more young people like you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mabatu. You see, the things we learn from the young people.
It's a heart.
So in a sense, she had said, from my perspective, I actually think there's nothing wrong with wearing a short skirt, short dress, skirts, shorts. Honestly, people in our society need to change their way of thinking, according to my perspective. But I think Fasiha also had a lesson in there that win people over. Don't just tell people, deal with my short skirt. I think that's the level of intelligence I'm respecting Fasiha for. Not a lot of young people think that way. It's easy to say, this is who I am. I have the right to dress the way I want to dress. Deal with it. Or you can say to people, I think we had that discussion. Did we have it last week when we said, please tell me what is wrong with my sleeveless dress? Please tell me what is wrong with my short skirt. Because when they realize there's actually no explanation for it, or as they explain, they realize they actually have no point, you've actually made yourself an ally who next time will actually be standing up for you to say, it's actually okay to wear a sleeveless dress. So I agree with you, Innocentia. It's the how that you tackle it. And it's a pity, I think Innocentia was not here for the last session, because we kind of addressed that under session 5. Kylie, I think it's also to show how we dress and represent ourselves, okay? So Kylie is agreeing, okay? Okay.
And Tyra also asked, just a bit above that, how did you feel when the lady told you the dress that I wore was inappropriate? I thought I'll just bring that in here. I think your initial feeling, and it's also like a learned behavior. Oh, I'm wrong. I'm embarrassed. I must have done something wrong. And it's something that we constantly are taught to believe that we are the problem. So yeah, that was the initial feeling. But then I also had to be like, and exactly what Rita said, what is the purpose and intention of what she's saying? And I also had to be very clear, and I think Mbato spoke about this, politics is hard. And being a young person and being a young woman enter into a very, number one, male-dominated and old-dominated space, they are very threatened by us, very. And it's more likely because the debate was fire and that I did really well that day. That's more likely what it was about. And she couldn't touch me on sort of form. She couldn't touch me on the substance of what I was saying, the argument. So yeah, the only thing that she felt that she could attack me on was on that. And so while initially I think I was very taken aback, I had to put it in context and be like, said, we know that this is not about your dress, that this is more about what you represent and who you are in the space. And also the last thing, remember that when you walk into a room, you don't just represent you. I don't just represent Fasiha. Natasha doesn't just represent Natasha, etc. We represent women, whether we like it or not. We carry that burden on our shoulders, and women of color who are constantly having to prove ourselves, constantly having to go through the violence of that system, etc. So never forget that you're not just you or representing yourself in the space. Perhaps there will come a time, and I hope there will be, where we can just be accountable for ourselves and just be us. But until we equalize the playing fields, we will always be used as examples both for and against liberation of women.
True. So we're going to take one more question from the mentees, which is Lemiz's question. And then we're going to now transition, because we've talked a lot about moral dilemmas, ethical dilemmas that we meet in life. But the second part of this discussion is about how to make decisions to address those moral dilemmas. So there's a framework, which I will do a quick touch base on. Then we have a role play, and then collectively as a group, we're going to try and apply that framework. So the last question that has come through, Fasiha, did you ever feel like giving up on something?
Yes, it is very normal to feel like that. There are going to be days where you really do want to give up and you're so tired and you're so fed up. That feeling is not what defines you. What defines you is how you pick yourself up. And don't let people who are successful tell you, oh, they never wanted to give up. That's nonsense. There are more days than not. I'm like, Jesus, this problem in the state, problem in this department, oh my God, is it possible? Like, you're bashing your head against the wall. And you often think, okay, you're crazy. You're not crazy for feeling like that. You're very normal. The system is often set up for us to feel like we must give up and for us to give up. So that's normal. But find ways and coping mechanisms so that that's not what becomes the center. So that you have a day, you can cry it out, you watch series, you speak to your friend, you do your thing. You do what makes you happy. And then the next day, you pull yourself together and you're like, bro, I'm going to do this. This is important. And then you just keep going day after day, because there's no perfect science to it. Don't let anyone tell you, there's this trick particularly. It's just perseverance every day. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And she's just spoken about members of her village. So again, I keep taking it back to the different sessions we've had. There are people, Fasiha, I think what you're saying is that there are people who who to go to that will help you bounce back, isn't it? When you're feeling a little bit low and down, right? Fasiha. I was saying that are there particular people that who to go to that are able to pull you out of that low moment?
Yeah, it also depends on what the nature of that low moment is.
Yes.
So like when it was the thing about what I was wearing, one of the people I went to was my mom, because I was like, maybe she'll probably give me, and it wasn't just my mom, I also spoke to other young women sort of across the spectrum who are both in corporate and in sort of politics, be like, has this ever happened to you? Yes, was the answer to most people. So it was also understanding what the issue is and who to go to, because depending on who you go to, you'll get different pieces of advice. So just keep that in mind. You don't have to go to the same person every time.
And that's what we say about building a village. By the way, this is why in Girls for Girls, we talk about not having one mentor, but we actually have multiple people that you go to. And in the earlier sessions, when we say build a village, the members of that village are there for different reasons. Sometimes it's for moral support, some it's for political, the knowledge as to how to guide yourself and things like that. For me, everything you're saying is reinforcing what we historically have been talking about in this group. So we're going to move on because it's now 3:40.